Hi there, Carl. Hi. Sorry if I startled you.
No, hold on a second. I'm taking a call. I've got to take this.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I'm with you.
Oh, okay. Can I get the last four social from you?
Hi there, Liza Jane. How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. How's everything? You're back from the elk ranch?
I am back from the wilds of the bugling boys. Yes. It was awesome. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
That's great.
Don't have much of an appetite yet. I cook so much food, ridiculous amounts of food. New dessert every day, stuff I never cooked before. It was really fun. But man,
Wow.
I'm like, oh, you want that? Give me a bowl of cereal. I'll call it good for now.
No more cooking.
No more cooking. Yeah. How about you? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah.
Good.
How's
How's your puppy dog?
She's doing much better.
Good.
No big emergencies at the moment. She did eat a bar of chocolate and that wasn't great, but she's
Right.
okay.
Yeah. Hi, Mark.
Good afternoon. I was going to say good morning, but it's not. It's past afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mark Stern, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm on day 21 or 2 of my consecutive run of COVID and COVID rebound, but I'm feeling great right now.
Okay, good. Glad to hear it.
That sounds terrible, Mark.
It was manageable, but it was a little tiresome, just especially the second go around. I wasn't anticipating that. But.
So what happened? You got sick, got through it, and then got sick again?
Yeah, they call it rebound, but it basically means the viral load in your body didn't go away all the way and it resurfaces and you get to start over.
Oh, sweetie.
It's terrible.
Yeah, I hadn't had it yet, so I guess I'm paying my dues.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Go big or go home, huh?
Yeah, all right. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Yeah.
What the heck?
Is Carl rocking out?
Yeah.
Oh, hell.
So, Carl, it sounds like the OWEB board may be coming to your place, or at least some of us, in October. Oh, he's frozen now. Are you there, Carl?
He's there. I don't think he can hear us though.
Yeah.
Okay, am I here? I'm having a hell of a time getting on here. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, well, just in time.
So, Carl, it sounds like the OWEB board, at least some of us, might be visiting your place in October.
Oh, good. Yeah, Renee contacted me and said if that would work, and I'd love to have you. That's great.
Yeah. Well, at least I responded yes. So you
Well,
got at least one.
Well, good, Mark. Appreciate that.
Two.
Okay.
Well, OWEB funded the preliminary study on making it happen. So without OWEB, we wouldn't have gotten it going. So
Good. I always like to visit OWEB projects. So
the dams are not quite an OWEB project, but still pretty important for y'all to see that too.
yeah, at least some of us are going to be taking a tour. So we'll be glad to take a look at what you've done on your property there.
Yeah, well, that's why I just finished mowing a whole bunch of stuff and got in here about 5 minutes ago, and I'm sort of trying to get it together. So, but I'm there now, so we're good. Okay, it's 1:01. I got a message from Jane, who's going to be late. Let's see. We've got, I think, also, I think who else is not going to be here? Sristi is going to be an hour late. She was double booked.
And
And-
Marette wasn't going to be able to make it either.
Well, I think she is. Marette was going to have a hip replacement, but they had to cancel it. Her doctor had a family emergency, and so I think Marette's going to be here.
But actually, Carl, Marette sent an email. We were both on that same email string this morning, and her father-in-law passed away, I think Sunday. So he was in his 90s and in Portland. I don't know any more than that, but Marette had said she wasn't going to be able to make it because they were in Portland attending to things there.
Okay, well, then that maybe worked out well that she had her surgery canceled.
That's exactly what she said.
Yeah. Okay, well, good. Well, Mauricio's here, so if Mauricio's here, we can start. That's all we have to wait on. Mauricio. So, okay, well, great. Well, let's get started, and I'd like to hear what's up with everybody. Liza Jane, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. Just finished that month of elk camp and cooking and being out in the mostly quiet, except for all the elk bugling. It was really nice. So I'm back home, which is great. And I just got a email about the Biden administration pumping a whole bunch of money towards restoring salmon and steelhead. Look like, I haven't read it all, but looks pretty exciting for the Columbia Basin. Specifically, there's some, and so we'll see what happens with that. But I always like hearing good fish stories.
That's great, Liza Jane. So it must have been a bow hunt, a bow camp.
It was, yeah. And everybody, for the most part, filled their tags. So
Great.
it was good. I just cooked. That was
Yeah.
fun too.
What a great time of year, though, to be out and about.
It is. It was really beautiful. Saw bears and lots of birds and tons of elk, a few deer. So it was really nice.
That's great. Mauricio, what's happening? You're about to leave us for a little while.
That's right. Leave for Spain Sunday. Very excited for it. Good afternoon. Good to see you, everybody. It's been a pretty packed month since our last meeting. I think I've been hosting a number of really beautiful events. Took a group of about 400 folks over to Tualatin River National Wildlife Refuge. Latino folks that had never been to the refuge at all. The great majority of them don't speak English. And so we were doing like a Hispanic heritage celebration, and we had folkloric dancing, we had pan dulce, food, presentations, crafts, and it was just a massive success all around. And I'm hosting another one this Saturday, right before I leave. And we've been doing all kinds of beautiful things. Once again, just connecting those universes that seem to be working in parallel, but somehow they just don't quite meet one another, and just bring relevance about the work of conservation and how we all need to care about this world, and just all kinds of beautiful things. So thank you for that, Carl.
Wow. Did you say 400?
About 300 to 400.
That's
All
incredible.
together.
Wow, man. Congratulations. That's just awesome.
Thank you.
Must have been very fulfilling to see that happen. Oh, well, that's great. Mark Stern, what have you been doing?
Well, mostly laying low, but one project I've been helping on a little bit, some of you may know or may remember in the 80s, several people, Jerry Scoville and Steve Herman and a few others, surveyed for upland sandpipers out in Grant County and Bear Valley, Logan Valley. And Holly Atkinson did some work up in Starkey and that part of the world. Long story short, anyway, Steve was a professor at Evergreen. He passed away a couple of years ago, and Jerry and another of the people have been trying to pull together all the studies they did on upland sandpipers in the 80s and 90s and put it together so it doesn't get lost. And it's been kind of interesting to help them pull that together. And it's also unfortunate, though, but the number of sightings and just looking at eBird and the Birders World, upland sandpipers are not being seen in Grant County and Northeast Oregon anymore, and probably ripe for a resurvey, although the birding community is pretty on that bird because it's a rare bird and they all like to tick it off. And there's been only a couple sightings in the last 15 years. But anyway, I've been plugging away on that. That's been kind of interesting to dig back in the past and see what you can remember.
You've got a lot from your past, Mark. You worked on a ton of projects in different species, and that's great. You're still engaged in them. Did everyone see Mark's had a great chapter in a book, a birding book that came out not long ago for Oregon, a really nice book. All right, well, great.
Carl likes it because the chapter was on Klamath wetlands. Other than that, I don't know if you really care.
That's true.
Mark, what did you say the name of that sandpiper is?
Upland sandpiper.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll look for them. We have lots of sandpipers, so I'll look.
Maybe you'll find one.
Oh,
Mark,
yeah. I found lucky.
Mark Labhart, what's happening at Sisters?
Well, we just got done with the folk festival. It's a huge event every year. It brings in bands and groups from all across the nation for a huge event here. It sells out every year. So my wife and I go to it every year. It's a great event. The rain held off for the most part, but I'm glad to see the rain in the last few weeks that we've had. It's been very beneficial to get those fires knocked down a little bit and get some water back into the watersheds. And then definitely looking forward. We don't have a commission meeting this month, but we've got a 3-day, looks like OWEB meeting, a board meeting in Klamath Falls. So we're going to go down and tour the dams. I think we're going to tour the dams, aren't we, Liza Jane? We're going to look at something down there regarding the dams, and then going to look at Carl's place and do some tours around the area. So I'm looking forward to that. And also looking forward to probably spending some OWEB dollars out on the ground. I always look forward to doing that. It's always fun to give away free money. So we're looking forward to seeing you, Carl, and then looking at your place.
Looking forward to having you. I thought at one point there was going to be a joint ODF and W OWEB meeting.
There was, and Sarah might know more than I do, but I understand a couple commissioners couldn't make the date. And so they decided to go ahead and cancel that tour for the commissioners. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, just to say, I appreciate OWEB coming to the Klamath Basin. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on, and we need to get the ODF and W commission here. That'd be great. I mean, we're lining up for some really great stuff. So appreciate OWEB coming.
And then last, I'll just close. Mark and I are trying to get a coffee here in Sisters with the new board chair of TNC to talk about fish and wildlife issues and stuff. So I think we got it scheduled for sometime in October, right, Mark?
I think we're looking at that Wednesday, the 18th, maybe.
Yeah, the 18th. So yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting the new Rob Hinman, I think is his name. He's the new board chair of TNC.
I think he's the incoming. I don't know exactly.
Incoming. Okay.
But yeah, Rob Hinman.
Well, great. As usual, you guys are moving and shaking. Maybe you can wake TNC up and get them back into the Klamath Basin. Kelly Timchak.
Hey there, good afternoon, everybody. I am was enjoying the rain quite a bit, but I am glad that it's sunny again because we're kind of in the middle of house projects and replacing a lot of rotten siding and non-existent boards underneath that. So that's been consuming a lot of our life right now, but it's good and needs to be done. So I've been working on a lot of that. Been at the beach a lot with the kids lately. It's been really nice out there. The swell went back down again. So we had some really big, like 30-foot swells last week, which are really impressive and super fun to watch, but not from the beach, of course. So, and other than that, I'm working on a lot of grant applications right now. I've got a couple of OWEB things and NOAA things, but there's, as Liza Jane mentioned, there's a lot of money kind of rolling around still here for a lot of restoration work. So I'm looking to jump into that as well. So happy to be here with you guys today.
Thanks, Kelly. And just so everyone is aware, Kelly has been really trying hard to get us hooked up with a missing member, and she's put me in touch with some people, and she reached out to some individuals, and so we're trying to move that forward, and I really appreciate Kelly doing that. So thanks, Kelly. Jane, you made it.
I did. I wasn't even much late. It took a while to get in, but so I have some fun news. You remember we funded the feasibility. We helped fund the feasibility study for an underpass for the Harborton Frogs. That was one of our projects last year that we funded, and that feasibility study is coming along. And on Friday, they showed us the design. And it's doable, it's complicated, it's expensive, but we think maybe we can pull it off. So great project. And U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service took the lead on doing the feasibility study, and we put some money into that along with them. And it just involves moving the road a little bit, which gets really expensive, but anyway, you'll hear more about that later. I'm sure they'll be coming back to our group with another proposal when they get ready to look for funding.
Oh, that's great.
Jane,
Yeah.
you probably saw it, but there was a really nice article about that project in the Oregonian over the weekend, and Jane was mentioned multiple times in there as the founder of this effort, and a lot of kudos to Jane for making that happen.
Way to go, Jane.
Thanks. It's been wonderful. So anyway, we got a lot of potential new volunteers out of that story. That's going to keep me busy just getting back to them all and trying to find a team for them. So I'll be busy.
Reva, how have you been?
I'm good. I'll be quick because we have a packed agenda today, and but next month I will be at the Outdoor Recreation Summit representing OCRF. And so if anybody has, I can send an email about this. If you have any ideas for what projects could be highlighted at the summit, or grantees that could come and guest speak for the Outdoor Recreation Summit in Coos Bay, I'll reach out to you about that.
I had mentioned to her, some of you remember the Ochoco Trails project. That was a pretty good recreation project, but there may be others that I'm not thinking of. So if you think of any, go ahead and get hold of Reva about it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
And then also real quick, I just wanted to thank the members of the public that have joined us today. So looks like we have Mike Toady from Oregon Hunters Association. Thanks for joining us. Stephen Toshi and Tim Gresseth from Oregon Wildlife Foundation. Thanks for joining, everybody. And then one other thing, we have Tiffany Caldwell. She's a new member of the Habitat Division Grants team, and she's actually going to be joining our meetings, and she's going to be taking minutes for us. So please welcome Tiffany.
Oh, great.
Hello. I'm glad to be here.
Hi, Tiffany. Yeah, so is that, I wasn't aware that that's happening. That's great. So we're going to get some help. Tiffany, well, welcome, Tiffany. Welcome from all of us. And at some point, we're going to have to learn a little more about you. So when we don't have such packed schedule, we'll find out. Okay, well, I think as she pointed out, we do have a packed schedule. Let's go ahead and get started by reviewing the minutes. Have you got that motion?
Turn audio on. Sorry, we're having a little audio difficulties. Right.
Okay, so can we get a motion from someone on this?
Carl, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from our September meeting as provided.
Thank you. Do we have a
Second.
second? We got a second. All in favor? Looks like everybody says good. All right, so we got that done. Moving on, we have an important thing to discuss here, and that is the, I think we're moving on to the OARs. Reva and Sarah, did you want to start that?
Yeah. Okay, so for this, everyone should have hopefully received the final edits to the OCRF administrative rule revisions. And so today we will be asking for the committee to, if they approve these final edits, and then so that throughout the process of the OAR revisions, they will be sent after this for DOJ review, and then there would be a director's office review as well. And so that's still pending. And so there may be further edits, minor edits to the OARs. However, if anything significant were to be changed, any substantial changes were to be made, I would send that out to the committee as a courtesy notice for any substantial changes. So that's just a note on how that process kind of works. But today we are asking for for approval of the rule revisions that from the final edits.
So before we make that, does anyone have any comments about the OARs and the changes that are there? Mark, I know that Mark Stern, I know you had spent a lot of time and had some comments early on. Do you feel like your concerns were addressed, and were you happy with the outcome? Mark Stern still with us? Oh, I don't see his name. Maybe we lost him. Does anyone say, I don't see Mark Stearns up here. Well, dang. Mark seemed to be paying the closest attention to this. I was hoping to get his input. From my perspective, there are some changes. Well, let's see, is Srishti here now? No. I had a discussion with Sarah, and maybe she can comment on this a little bit.
Mark is back.
Okay, Mark. There you are. We lost you, Mark.
Yeah, I didn't realize I hadn't plugged in my laptop, so it decided it was done for the moment.
Well, the reason
Sorry.
that was bad timing for us is what we were talking about the OARs, and Reva put up a But, and I asked if anybody had any comments, and I pointed out that, Mark, you've been the most specific with your comments, and obviously have spent a lot of time looking at it. And it's relevant to the Forest Accord as well. And was wondering if you had anything to say about them in general, or if you're concerned.
I guess just one observation, and I think Riva did a great job of taking some of the thoughts I had from the last meeting and incorporating them into the OAR. So in terms of some of the things we brought up last time and talked about, I'm all good to go on that. But one observation, and it was about eligible people, or eligible entities that can apply for grants. And what's not included is any sort of for-profit, for lack of another word, individual or company. So I think of some outfit like small Turnstone Consulting that does marbled murrelet surveys. At least the way it's written right now, I don't think they'd be eligible. And in terms of individuals, it says individuals may partner with an eligible organization. I don't know exactly what partner means. It could probably be interpreted a couple different ways. But I guess I would just ask Riva, maybe when you and Sarah talk to DOJ, if that's set in stone, maybe that's set in stone, but it seems like that might be excluding some groups that might be really good applicants to do a really good project for us.
That's a good point, Mark. I seem to recall, and maybe some of you that were here, this came up when we were first doing them. And I may be mistaken, but it seemed like there was something in like even the legislation about it that we couldn't do it because it came up. I know we had. So you guys might look at that. I think Mark, as usual, has come up with a really good suggestion, but I seem to recall something about that. So you might look to see it if there's something in our enabling legislation or something about not funding for-profit.
Yeah, we can look into that, why the for-profit entities were excluded.
The other one, and Riva, you and I talked about it, maybe you can share it with people, but you said you found that statute that might allow some compensation for advisory committee members if appropriate.
Yeah, there's a statute that I was going to add into the OARs that was about if there are certain income requirement eligibility, then if that's passed, then they can may receive compensation. And so, but then I found out that we really don't need to have that compensation in our actual rules. That can actually go in our operating procedures instead. So I might be finding a better location for that, but still putting that in our operating procedures as opposed to our administrative rules. So that's in the works.
Is it a problem that the current OARs that we're looking at here say advisory committee members shall not be, reimbursed? Are we going to be in conflict with the two rules, so to speak?
No, I don't think so, because once we go through DOJ review, and that's when we can really find out if we should have any compensation in there or not. We'll make it so it all makes sense.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here to Sarah Reif, Habitat Division Administrator. Hi, everybody. I am going to be recommending that we just take all the compensation language out of the OARs. None of our other grant program administrative rule sets talk about compensation because it's addressed in other statutes and rules elsewhere in the state. And so, as Riva's saying, it's something that can be in our operating procedures, and it'll say, in general, you're not compensated unless you're one of these eligible entities. And that's from that new statute that you're referring to, Mark, which basically says if you're below a certain income level, you can be compensated for hardship in order to participate on the committee. And so we'll all articulate all of that in the operating procedures, but that language, just in terms of having a rule set that says like simple and parsimonious as possible. It just doesn't even need to be in rule.
Great. Sounds good. Thanks. Thank you both for checking into that.
Yep.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments about the OARs? Okay, well, two things. One, first of all, I'd really like to thank Mark Stern again. I mean, Mark really helped. He made some changes and made the document much better, and I appreciate him taking the time to go through them. And so thank you, Mark. The other thing, I just wanted to hear from Sarah a little bit. I had talked to her about, because I think the OCRF has been successful in many ways because we have had a lot of flexibility, and we did a lot of innovative things that we weren't constrained to do. And my biggest concern, and I read them and couldn't really see where they would get in the way, but I don't want to have a situation where the OAR, we can't do something innovative or different because the OARs won't allow it. And specifically, and I think we'll talk about this later, I think there's an opportunity for us to really enhance our relationship with the Oregon Wildlife Foundation. We have a great relationship with them already, but there may be some really interesting things we can do with them down the road, and that'll be part of our strategic thinking. And I didn't want to have these rules passed and find out that there are things we couldn't do because of it. So Sarah, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but because I only talked to you about this last week, but do you have any comments about that?
Well, I share your interest in wanting to retain as much flexibility as possible with this program. And I think that's the lens through which we looked at the OARs, while also trying to meet, if you recall, one of the main reasons why we were doing this was clarifying for the public sort of the transparency of our process and who's eligible and how we make decisions and what's what the funding can go toward, et cetera. So based on that advice from DOJ, we're kind of trying to thread that needle between providing enough specificity to be transparent with the public while also retaining as much flexibility as possible. And I think we've done that. I think when you called me, Carl, one of the topics that we discussed was when it comes to donors who have an interest in supporting projects that have been vetted through the OCRF grant review process. If you all recall, historically, the program allowed for donations to come into the OCRF account in a couple of different ways. One is just through generalized donations, like when someone's buying a license on the electronic licensing system, they can click to donate. And I call those like generalized donations. That will definitely continue. Another way that donations used to come in were for specific projects. And not only that, we also used to provide state match or a plus up for those donations for specific projects. Over time, that was all part of the 1-for-1 challenge that was issued to us by legislature or in the early days of OCRF. Mission accomplished. We've now gone away from that, and we no longer plus up those donations. But what we've also realized on the administrative side is that we're a small program. We're basically a staff of one. Now we have some support from Tiffany, but we in the interest of kind of limiting the amount of time. Are you guys all still with me? Am I still coming through clear? You all just flashed. Yeah. Okay. In the interest of not spending staff's time too much on that transaction where a donor wants money to go directly to a specific project, we think it just makes the most sense to have, if a donor wants to give specifically to a certain project, they should just work directly with that applicant. But we would be very happy to share. I think one thing donors are looking for is all of the staff review and vetting and committee review that has gone on for projects that have been submitted for funding. And we'd be happy to provide that vetted, information and vetted project list and staff review to potential donors to eliminate and, as a show of partnership, but also to eliminate that step for donors. But rather than route the money through the department, it just makes more sense for the donor to work directly with the applicant. There may be reasons why a donor needs or wants to go through an entity, and that's where we maybe in some of our strategic planning conversations, we can explore how Oregon Wildlife Foundation might be able to serve in that role for us, and or other possible creative solutions as well. Does that get at what you were wanting me to address, Carl?
Totally, yeah. I appreciate your efforts to keep our flexibility with these. I know you have to follow certain rules and things we have to do because it's a state entity, but so I appreciate your efforts there. Mark Labhart has his hand up.
Well, thanks, Carl. So I probably should have talked to Sarah about this beforehand, but as I was reading the rules, first of all, I really appreciate that flexibility that we put in the rules about if we have a vacancy for over a year, we can go outside the region to get a candidate. So that should help get that one position filled. So I appreciate that. So good work there. But when I read the rules, I'm trying to pull it up here now. It talked about, let me pull it up where it was. At the very beginning, I think I brought this up once before, the purpose of the Conservation and Recreation Fund appropriated by the State Department of Fish and Wildlife is to carry out activities to serve, protect, maintain, and enhance fish and wildlife resources in Oregon. So there's always been that, and you just brought it up a little bit ago, Carl, about the Ochiko Trail project that OHA was involved in and others, how positive that was. So with these rules, I tried to find where we're specifically mentioning recreation. We do a really good job of protecting, maintaining, enhancing fish and wildlife resources, but the fund also funds recreation programs. And so I'm just wondering about an interest or an intent to say that. And if I've not covered that, if it's covered somewhere else, Sarah or Reva, maybe you could mention that to me. But when I was reading through it, and I've just scanned it a couple different times, but is there a place where we specifically ring out about recreation activities also?
So if you go to section 0020, which is on, I think, just the next page.
I'm there.
Expenditures from the fund, the activities for which the department in collaboration with the advisory committee and as approved by the commission may expend monies from the fund include, but are not limited to. Recreation is number 2.
Improving fish and wildlife.
Improving engagement of the public in wildlife watching, hunting and fishing opportunities, and in other outdoor recreation opportunities related to and in support of healthy fish and wildlife populations.
Okay.
And then education and outreach and engagement of the public, including diverse and underserved communities, is number 3.
Yeah, well, I'm just kind of wondering if we ought to put something up in the front,
In the
because
purpose.
it's you did a good job there. 2 and 3 do cover that and mention it. But if it's how we're going to expend the funds, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being a little bit over cautious here about if somebody can say, well, it doesn't really talk about it in the purpose of the program, but that is a major purpose, is to do that. So I'm not going to follow my sword by any means, because you do cover it in.
Yeah, comment well taken. I don't know if there's more discussion with the committee in response to Commissioner Labhart on that matter, but if the committee would like us to, we need to crosswalk with what the bill said our purpose was. But if there's room for us to add in something about wildlife-based recreation or, something, we can look into that.
The way you have that worded, I really like, recreation consistent with the above goals, that means it's not going to just be any recreation project. It has to be consistent with our mandate to implement the Oregon Conservation Strategy and all of that. So if it's easy to add something in that first section that's reflexive in that way, that says, recreation, because it is in our name, recreation consistent with the above purposes, or it's kind of like the way you have it written.
I think you hit it on the head, Carl. Consistent with the strategies identified in the Oregon Conservation Strategy, or something like that. Mention the Oregon Conservation Strategy because that'll hit it then. So that we don't make it though it's just wide open, but it's consistent with
Actually, I think that's probably worth doing because we don't want to miss. Part of this is to inform the public correctly about who we are and what we're doing, and you don't want to get a kayaking group thinking that, I can apply to this, and if it's not clear early, and I don't know who actually reads the OA, but maybe they do, and then just make it clear. That way it's clear that if you got a recreation fund, a recreation project, it's got to be consistent. Because we've had a couple of those that were just straight recreation, not any real conservation piece. They all ranked extremely low, and it's a waste of people's, you don't want to waste their time that they're replying to us for those things because recreation is in our name. And maybe if you have it spelled out there pretty well, that we won't see those applications. So it's probably worth sticking
more thought. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We'll craft something like, I think what I'm hearing is in the purpose statement, you'd like to see some language, something like, and to support nature-based recreation consistent with the Oregon Conservation Strategy.
Yeah, well said. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, just sounds great. And that helps us with our outdoor equity projects, and that includes those in that kind of a statement, trying to make it so that it's not, it gives, again, informs the public, but gives us flexibility to do a lot of different things. Okay, great.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, we can add that on. The first part of the purpose is in statute, but I believe we can add on that piece to there in addition to that,
Great.
to add the recreation piece.
All right. Well, again, thank you all for your comments and looking at that. I think, Sarah, unless you have anything further, I think we may be ready to go forward with this. And Sarah, thank you again so much for your work on this and making sure we're doing things right. And I really appreciate the effort you put into all of this. So with that, we have a draft motion here. Does anyone want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make it. I move to approve the 2023 OCRF administrative rule revisions with the continued authority to correct spelling, grammar, punctuation, and the other comments as we discussed this afternoon.
Great. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. This is Jane.
Thank you, Jane. With that, all in favor? Looks like we're all good. All right. Good. Well, it's good to get that over with. But it's important, though. It is important. We have to be consistent, and I think our Wild West days are over, so we have to be a little more careful in how we proceed. So, let's see. Oh man, what did I do with the agenda? I can't find my agenda, Reva, so I'm going to have to ask you to.
Yeah, of course. So next on our agenda, we actually have a project presentation with Taylor Chappell. He's the principal investigator for this project, assessing shark presence in potential sea otter reintroduction areas in Oregon. So thank you so much, Taylor, for joining us. And just as a quick reminder, if you could keep your presentation within 10 minutes, because we do have a packed agenda today, that would be great. And then we can have a few minutes after for questions. So with that, I can pass it over to Taylor, excuse me, to share his screen.
Wonderful. All right, thanks. Do you see that screen?
Not yet.
Not yet, but it sometimes takes a second.
I will be honest and say that Teams is not my normal, so
We hate it
says
too.
that let me know if it does pop up. It says
Right.
I'm sharing it with you all.
Yeah, I don't see that. Reva, is there
Well,
something on your end that you have to do?
So I stopped sharing and that should allow him to share. Do you see the little icon at the top right-hand corner next to the red leave button for share?
So I have my share tray and did not allow me to. Let me jump back out and jump back in and see if that will solve it.
Okay.
Back.
There's
Taylor,
some,
you can also email it
Wait.
to Reva and have her present for you.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Sure.
while we're getting that squared away, I wonder if we could do the person for our second project.
Yeah, we have Colleen Miller, if you don't mind jumping ahead to you, we could start with you and then do Taylor's presentation afterwards.
You're on mute, Colleen.
Sorry
There
about
we-
that.
Great.
Thanks. Okay, so let's see if I have some luck.
Yeah.
Sweet. You can see my screen?
That worked out. We
Perfect.
do.
Just magic. Okay, so some of these I'm just gonna whip through fairly quickly to get to the project updates, but feel free to hold your questions and we'll try to cover everything at the end when we have a couple minutes. Quick introduction, I'm the Education Director with the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council. Oh, now it will not. There we go. You guys have seen our grant proposal and hopefully maybe the last project update, but just in case for those of you who haven't, this is our mission and vision. Similar to most watershed councils, I'm sure throughout Oregon, we do have a fairly large education and outreach program though that we're pretty proud of. We've been fairly successful with that for about the past 15 years or so. Three program areas: habitat restoration, monitoring, community outreach, and education. What I'm going to be talking about and what is sort of the key component with our Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund grant is really a combination of education, outreach, and restoration. Just a quick overview. This is our geographic area we serve. It's 2.2 million acres. It's pretty huge. This was a fun project map we put together last year just to highlight the 50 different projects that we've done in the past 25 years of our existence. So today, of course, I'm just going to be talking about our Whychoose Creek activities over the past year, but this kind of gives you a sense of our geographic scope and scale. And then community-based stream stewardship. We really believe that engaging our community in all of our restoration work is truly kind of the insurance policy so that our restoration investments aren't undone in a generation. So I run our youth education program, which we call the Upstream Project, as well as all of our community outreach and stewardship activities. So in order to make all that happen, of course, we're super fortunate to have many collaborative partnerships throughout Central Oregon. This is truly just a short list,
But this list does include pretty much most of the partners that have been involved with our work in the past year that OCRF has helped us fund and accomplish. So then diving into the specific kind of project outcomes and updates for the past year. A couple things that have happened that are a part that OCRF has helped us fund and make happen are we just finished last fall a huge restoration project at Creekside Park, which is right in the community of Sisters on Whychoose Creek. With that, every plant that was planted, which was 2,400, was planted by community volunteers and students, which was very exciting. It was a super busy fall last year. And then the photo you see on the right is another large project that we're still in the process of working on at Rimrock Ranch, which is a huge ranch that was recently acquired by the Deschutes Land Trust. Multi-phase restoration project, but the community involvement piece has just been super exciting. And again, that's a key component of what OCRF has helped make happen. So here's some of the stats as far as the project update for the past really 6 months since my last report. So about 50 community members engaged on hands-on stewardship at three of our restoration project sites. 620 local students will be engaged by the end of this October. And then few thousand native riparian plants where we finished 2 interpretive signs that will be installed at Creekside Park and have been doing lots of great restoration project site tours for hundreds of community members and resource partners. So here's one of the 2 restoration project signs. They're not installed yet, but they will be installed at Creekside Park on Whychoose Creek. Our goal with this one is really to give some of the history as far as the impacts, ecological impacts to the health of the creek, as far as really complete absence of stream flow for a number of years. And then with increased stream flow through our partnerships, we've been doing the habitat restoration work out there. In the upper right-hand corner is some of our student artwork, which we're excited to highlight on our interpretive signs. And then the second interpretive sign is really just diving into the details of the restoration activities there, knowing that we want to keep the community engaged for as long as possible, for many, many years, so that they understand why the restoration project happened and why it's so important to continue to steward that work and the conditions that we've restored. That's sort of the quick and dirty update. Love to dive into any of the details and answer any questions you may have.
Great, Colleen, thank you very much for that overview. One of the things that I've always just really been impressed with your organization as well as the others in the Deschutes is how coordinated it seems that you are. Maybe it just looks that way, but it looks like there's a lot of collaboration and you all have sort of figured out what you're really good at, and you've taken that role and worked together really well. At least that's the way it looks from the outside. Is that really that way?
I would say 99% it really is that way. And I could probably give you a whole bunch of reasons why I think it's that way, but I think at the 30,000 foot level, a lot of it has to do with OWEB, frankly, and the FIP, when they started doing their strategic investments, 14, 15 years ago, we just realized that if we worked closely with the Deschutes River Conservancy, the Deschutes Land Trust, and the Crooked River Watershed Council, we could probably accomplish a whole heck of a lot more and decrease a lot of the competition for some of those OWEB funds. And so we came together and developed what we call the Deschutes Partnership. And that's really been fueling, not only helping us receive some of that OWEB FIP funding, but also just, we sit around in this conference room together all the time and just try to figure out what we each do best and how to do that and how to support one another. And again, not compete when we don't need to.
Well, thank you, Colleen. That is very gratifying for me to see that that's the outcome. I was on the OWEB board during the genesis of all of that, the SIPs and the FIPs, and you guys were always the poster child. You're a great model, and we need to replicate that all over the place. So thank you for that. Mark Labhart?
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing, Carl. Colleen, you're being a little bit left. Yeah, I don't know what the word I want to use here is, but you're an example of collaborative leadership with your groups and the other groups of the collaborative and working together to make things happen. And I've had since I live in Sisters, I get to see your work firsthand with the watershed group, and have taken several tours down in the Lord in the Upper Deschutes area. So very impressive work, great collaboration, and so. You guys deserve a lot of kudos for what you do, and I wish OCRF could provide more funding for your group, because we like to provide funding for projects that do good things. So maybe sometimes we could get together for a cup of coffee too, and meet you firsthand. I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, so sometime we can get together. So
Yeah, I would love that. And yeah, I'm glad that you've had a chance to go on some of our tours. And we have some plantings, volunteer plantings going on this fall. So if you have any interest and want to participate, just shoot me an email and we'll make it happen.
okay, well, maybe it's easier for you to shoot one to me, because I don't have your email, but mine's really easy. It's marklabhart@gmail.com.
Okay.
So,
I'll
okay,
do
thanks.
it. Thank you so much, Mark. And thanks, Carl, for the feedback. It's yeah, it's a great, I feel really lucky. We have a collaborative group, a collaborative climate here, and an incredible board of directors, and that makes it pretty easy.
Good. Thanks.
Well, that's great to hear. Thank you very much, Colleen. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Great. Well, Colleen, thanks again, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me.
Okay. Bye-bye. All right. So were we successful in getting ourselves hooked up there, Reva?
Yeah. Taylor, if you are ready, I can go ahead and share your slides, and then you can just tell me when you'd like to advance through your presentation.
Maybe
Sure.
Colleen, does Colleen have to unshare?
I think she does, yeah. Mhm.
There we go.
Thank you, Colleen.
All right.
All right, can everyone see that okay?
Great. Got it.
Wonderful. Thanks. Thanks for getting that going.
Yeah.
Well, hi, everybody. Nice to meet you all. I'm Taylor Chappell. I am a assistant professor at Oregon State, and I work and run the Big Fish Lab, which is a lab dedicated to the movement and dynamics of large marine predators. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about a collaborative project we have. The other PIs on this, Sal Jorgensen at Cal State Monterey Bay, Michelle Shape Martin at Fish and Wildlife Service. And this is some funding that we have got from you all through the Alaka Alliance to look at the overlap between sharks and otters. So you can go ahead and advance one. I'll just do a very quick sort of recap of the point of the project and then where we are currently. And so these are data from California, just showing the increase in shark-bitten otters in California, and just to show that there has been a rise and there is a correlation over time in an increase in shark bites and mortalities from otters. Go to the next one, please. And these are generally attributed to white sharks, and this is just a seasonal pattern of white sharks. And so we see that adults and subadults tend to go offshore for about half of the year, and then those animals in yellow, which are the subadults and adults, come to Central California, and some into Mexico, and then the juveniles tend to come into Southern California. We think that they're somewhat temperature limited. And so the majority of the interactions with sharks and otters that have been reported are in these general regions. If you go ahead and go to the next one. But there's been an increasing trend of expansion of white sharks. And so this just shows the available or the temperature along the coast. The blue arrow there is the typical range of juvenile white sharks. And then the pink is where that range is now expanded to given the warming coastal temperatures. And these juveniles are the ones that are most thought to be at fault for the otter bites and the otter mortalities. If you go to the next one as well. And then this is just showing a general trend of adults and subadults, so the animals that are in Central California, and just shows that over the past 10 years, there's been an increase in abundance of those animals. So not only are we seeing a further north expansion of white sharks, but we're also seeing an increase in those numbers. And so there's, next slide, please. There's been a correlated increase in strandings or mortalities, bites on otters in California. So that's that gray area. As you go to the right through time, you see that that's extending through months, as well as getting larger in years. So there's obvious relationship between otters, and so the goal of the ALOC Alliance is to reintroduce otters into Oregon to more of their historic range. So our goal was to look at, well, what's the overlap of sharks now? And our future goals are to look at what are the overlaps in sharks in the future, given changing climate conditions. Next slide, please. So we do know that there are currently overlaps with sharks and otters. So these red marks describe or show places where otter strandings have happened in the past. And about the last decade, there's been 20 otters that have stranded in Oregon, just 5 in 2020 and 7 in 2021. And out of 9 of those recovered animals, 6 of them, they think the mortality was a result of shark bites. And we know that sharks are here. Next slide, please, because there are historic interactions with humans. So there's been, since 1974, about 40 interactions, and they peaked in 2006 with 5. So not quite as many as people interact with sharks in California, but we also think about the number of people in the water is much different in these different regions. But this shows us that sharks are along our coast here in Oregon, but there's been very little work at all in Oregon to look at any distributions of sharks. Next slide. There is a little bit of information from acoustically tagged animals. So animals that I tag or my team have tagged in California that have come up, and available acoustic receivers. So acoustic tags are a small tag we put in the back of an animal that basically emits a ping, and when it comes back past a receiver within about 500 meters, that receiver records it. So the yellow and red circles there are places where other folks had receivers in historically that kind of go in at different periods in time. And then the black show locations that we've put in with the help of the OCRF funding and U.S. Fish and Wildlife to put some more permanent receivers in. So that is the black triangles there. So we currently have 7 receivers deployed in these regions. So these will pick up any of the sharks that we've tagged in California, as well as animals that we're tagging here in Oregon and Washington as well. Next slide, please. So you'll see that most of what we've talked about is white sharks, and that's historically what folks have looked at in California. But there's another very large predator, actually higher on the trophic scale than a white shark is, which is the broad-nosed seven-gill, which is ubiquitous shark in some of the bays in Washington and Northern California. And we're trying to start to understand their role. And as I said, they're even higher than the white shark. We've been out collecting samples from animals in Washington State. Next slide, please. And a good handful of these animals have fully consumed harbor seals. And so animals as small as about 1.3 meters will have an entire stomach full of harbor seals. So we know that they're eating marine mammals quite heavily in these estuarine systems. Next slide. And just last week, we caught an animal and looked at its stomach. Sorry for anybody eating breakfast right now. But we looked at its stomach. I guess it's lunchtime. Sorry. It's been a long day. Looked at its stomach, and it had what appears to be some hair left over from an otter. Whether this is a river otter or a sea otter, we're not quite sure. We're sending it off to get sampled. but it just shows that these animals are quite voracious predators of marine mammals and likely will be a predator of otters if otters are reintroduced into some of these bays. Next slide, please. So the work that we're doing, as I said, we put out 7 receivers. We have plans to put out about another 20 receivers. We were hoping to partner with the U.S. Coast Guard to put them on navigation buoys, but we were unfortunately unable to do that. They had some worries about their cleaning crews. So we're going back to plan B for that, which I'll talk about in a minute. But we have been unsuccessful finding white sharks in Oregon. It's really difficult because they don't seem to aggregate the way they do in other locations. But we have been able to tag 21 animals down in Central California. Some of those animals which make the movements up here. And then in Washington, we tagged about 42 7-gill sharks. And those animals will come out of the bays in Washington and move down along this acoustic array down into California. Next slide, please. So this is the detections from the receivers as of May of last year. The receivers stay in for about a year and then we recover them. So we're just about to recover the receivers probably in the next few weeks of all the places here. So hopefully very soon I'll have an update of these detections, but you can see all the sharks that are looking to the left are detections at Port Orford, sorry, at Coos Bay at Cape Arago. So there's a number of white sharks that were detected in those locations. And then there's one 7-gill, which is a shark that's swimming to the right on your screen. And so we likely, with more animals tagged this year and another 21 white sharks down south and 42 up north, that we expect those numbers to increase once we go and collect all of our receivers. Next slide, please. So that's where we're at right now. We're hoping, as I said, that we'll get more data back from this next round of receivers at an increased number of locations. But we're hoping to increase our tagging effort and the receiver array, again, to pick up some movements of sharks as they come up and down the coast, and then increase our tagging numbers, California as well as Oregon. And part of Oregon is part of the next steps about finding out better understanding of where exactly they are. We're expanding the broad-nosed 7-gill to Humboldt Bay, which is another one of the potential reintroduction sites, and there's connectivity between Oregon and Northern California. We're going to start working with eDNA so that we can get increased temporal and spatial resolution of both broad-nosed 7-gills and white sharks. And all of that will go together with some of those figures you saw before with the human interactions and some other parameters to do some habitat modeling. So not only do we know where the animals are occurring now, but we're going to hopefully be able to predict where those animals are moving and will move with increasing changes to water temperatures. So that was a very quick overview of it, but I'd be happy to answer any questions, and just want to say thank you very much for supporting this work. It is, I think, understanding sharks' roles in these coastal ecosystems is long overdue, and I appreciate that y'all are willing to invest in what I think is really important work, especially with this overlap with otters.
You're muted, Carl.
Oh, dang, I did a lot of talking there. I'll start over. Thank Taylor, thank you very much. That was great. It's really gratifying that we were able to be part of that and fund the information you're getting. Mark Labhart has his hand up.
Okay, thanks, Carl. With your permission, I see Bob Bailey on, who's president of the Alok Alliance Board. If he has any comments he'd like to make, be interested.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mark. No, I'm just tickled pink that we're able to get this work underway. This is a key question for reintroducing sea otters and their potential success over time. I mean, it's great science beyond just the implications for sea otters, but as an outfit interested in bringing sea otters back, it's essential we know what we're getting into in terms of potential shark predation and where that might be. So I'm really pleased with Sal and with Taylor and their work, and just looking forward to keeping it going. Because as you know, these things, 1 year's worth of data doesn't get you anywhere. It can start, but So we're looking at a long-term relationship with them, and hopefully we can keep this going.
Thank you, Bob. Mark Stern, you have your hand up?
Yeah, it's really interesting work research that you guys are involved in. So thank you for the presentation. And I realize it's sort of early and this is what you're trying to answer, but do you have a sense at this point, are shark populations of about the same density along the Oregon coast as they are in Washington or in California, or is that still kind of to be determined?
Oh boy, that's a Taylor question.
Are you there, Taylor? Maybe you're on mute too. I think somehow we lost.
He may have gone back to his faculty meeting, which is
he may
terrible purgatory to be in.
Oh, there he is.
Sorry. I'm back.
Okay, there was a question for you. Mark Stern, you want to repeat that?
Yeah, hey Taylor, I was saying I was really interested in research and I realize it might be kind of too early or to speculate, but do you have any sense at this point if shark populations along the Oregon coast are similar in density to what you see in Washington and California, or kind of to be determined?
In terms of white sharks or the seven gills?
Well, either or both, I guess.
Any. So I think what we're seeing is that we haven't been able to find these heavy aggregation sites like we have in California. So we've got, three sites, at least in Central California, where white sharks really, they stack in the fall and early winter. And we haven't been able to find those similar locations here. And so I think what it seems like is that the animals here they're a bit more distributed along the coastline. So really determining, what an abundance number is really difficult. I think that based on the numbers that we see, there's probably a fair number. I would guess, somewhere in the range of 50 to 60 animals that are going to be coming up and down the coastline, white sharks coming up down the coastlines throughout the year. But that's throwing a dart at a dartboard. With the seven gills, I think the seven gills is again, they're going to be more distributed, but they are, there's probably a population that's in the high hundreds, if not thousands, that are going to be moving from sort of the Washington, from Willapa Bay and areas like that down the Oregon coast, down into California, central and southern. So what I'm expecting is that we're going to see mostly a large seasonal movement of animals, and not necessarily a residency period the same way that we do either in Willapa Bay in Washington with broad-nosed seven gills, or in sort of the central and southern California for white sharks. That's, again, this is all the idea I think we have, but there are a lot of data that need to be collected, because really historically there's been almost no work in Oregon. I think we tagged the first shark electronically a few months ago. And we're catching up to 30 years worth of work down in California. So we still have a long ways to go.
Liza Jane.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Liza Jane, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. Taylor, I just have a question because I'm so curious. How do you get the receivers back?
Well, sometimes we don't. If you caught that screen really quickly, you could see that some of them don't come back. Yeah. So we have a few different types. One is a diveable unit, and so we've been working with the Oregon Coast Aquarium that they've been deploying these out on some anchors on the bottom. And those they're diver service and can go down and pull them up. The other type that we have are they have an acoustic release to them, so we can put them in the water and then we can communicate with them acoustically. They pop to the surface and they have a line, so we can pull the whole thing back up. And we do occasionally lose some of those to weather conditions, so they'll wash them out, which is what happened to our unit down near Coos Bay. The other way that we have done it in the past, and some of the ones that we have scattered around, are on existing moorings. So with the some OSU's OOI moorings, the oceanographic units. We have them integrated, and we're hoping in the next few months that I will actually be able to serve real-time data from those buoys when they detect whether it's a shark or a salmon or a sturgeon or whatever it is, up to their server. So you'll be able to look on a web portal and say, oh, hey, look, there's a shark swimming around Newport.
That's like the bird one that we're doing. The MODIS we're funding is going to have a thing where you can look it up online.
Yeah. Yeah, these are basically the same thing as a MODIS receiver, just underwater.
Yeah, I think in your presentation, I think one of the most fascinating bits of data that you put up there were the 9 carcasses found in Oregon, meaning that there is some sea otters visiting, and the fact that 6 of them were shark bite. That seems, I mean, that tells a lot. That tells us a lot right there.
Right. Yeah, and actually there was one that just washed up on Gerhardt last week, I believe, that they think was a shark bite as well. So there was one in Newport last year. So it is unfortunately common for animals that come down to get those bites.
Well, I guess a bigger point is, well, they are coming down, obviously. If you're having 9 or 10 wash up on the beach, there's got to be an awful lot more that have come down this way. And whether or not they're all getting eaten by sharks or not, that's, I guess, the answer you're trying to find. So really, really interesting stuff. I appreciate it. Thank you for giving us all that data. And Bob, thank you.
Thank you all.
Bob, thank you for being here, and thanks for all the incredible work you're doing on the Sea Otter. This is kind of one of our flagship projects that we've been very proud to support, and really are honored to be able to be part of it. So thank you, Bob.
Well, thank you, Carl, and thanks to all the advisory committees. I know we're competing with lots of great projects all across the state of Oregon, and each one has a passionate following. But what we're trying to do is really pioneering work, and it's a great partnership with you all. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you both. Any other questions from anyone?
And Carl, I'm happy to take anybody who wants to follow up. They're welcome to email me. I'm happy to talk about this at anytime, any of the findings that we have and things like that.
Great, Taylor. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure Kelly is wondering about that as she and her kids are wading around there on the beach. So, all right. Well, thanks again. That was great. Okay. Well, with that, I think we're at break time. We're a bit ahead, which is wonderful. Why don't we? It's 2:13. We're not supposed to start till 2:25. Let's do this and meet at 2:20. That'll give us a little bit longer break, and we'll still be ahead. So why don't we break unless anybody's got any comments, and we'll be back at 2:20. Sound good? All right, great. Hello, Sherilyn.
Hey Carl, how are you?
I'm well. Nice to see you.
Same. Hello, everybody else.
Well, I think we'll be going here and we'll wait, give people a little bit of time to get back. But yeah, I'm really looking for you. You were able to conduct some of these interviews, right?
I was, yes, I completed the group that represented our partners and grant applicants.
Right.
So,
I'm really interested in how that comes out.
yeah, they were great conversations.
There was I think Trout Unlimited wasn't able to participate, and I think we sent you another.
Yeah, Steve from
Steve.
yeah, I talked to him on Friday.
Oh, okay, that was quick. Great. He's been really, they've gotten, as you found out, I'm sure they've gotten some funds from us, and they've been really great to work with. Okay, well, I think we've got the vast majority here back. So Sherilyn is going to talk to us a little bit. Now we're going. I guess y'all are aware we're going to get into the kind of the meat of this meeting. Really, this is really important stuff. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. There's a couple of things that I've been thinking about, and later on we can get into some other stuff. But Sherilyn has been able to interview a bunch of our stakeholders and other folks that are important to us. And so with that, I think we can just get going and have Sherilyn give us her update.
Sounds good. Yeah, so the first agenda item I'll cover is, what I've been able to do so far on the stakeholder outreach. And then the next agenda item will be diving into the detail of some of the homework you all did, which I super appreciate because that just keeps the ball going. So with that, go ahead to the next slide there, Reva. So I need to update one number on here because we did make an adjustment because I was able to get with Steve. So we decided at our last meeting that we would get input from several different groups. So the group that I'm going to be talking about today is the group I was able to finish between the last meeting and this meeting, which is our grant applicants, several of whom happen to be coalition partners as well. So really, I should update that to reflect that. So we brainstorm with Carl and Mauricio to figure out who we wanted to meet with, and I was able to get all of those done. Some of the people that applied for grants received one or more grants. Some of those received one, but maybe weren't successful in another round. And then we talked to somebody that had applied, I think once and had been unsuccessful. So we felt like it gave us a really good representation of our partners and the people that are coming to us for funding. This is really, I think, just in a nutshell, the summary, but I'm going to dive into some detail in the upcoming slides. But in summary, if you were to ask this group some of the things that the OCRF should be looking to do in the next 2 biennium, it would be to continue to think about where you're going to get your funding from. At least keeping passive things like the licensing, checkbox that you all have still in place, because why turn away funds that are easy to get? This was the perspective, of course, from people that are looking to get money for projects. So that makes sense that they feel that way. They all felt we could improve our marketing and storytelling, and I'll talk about that in a little more detailing. And then they were really interested in that partnership. So I was listening to that previous segment about the Deschutes group, and I think that's an excellent opportunity of how we can build partnerships, but how we can foster partnerships amongst the people within our coalition as well, to just help expand either where we get our funds from and or to help diversify the type of projects that the OCRF is able to fund. So that was just the sort of high level nutshell. Any questions before I go into more details? Okay, awesome. Yeah.
Just when you pretty much cold called these people to some extent, right? You not talked to them before. What was
Right.
what was their general, did you get a general sense about the OCRF from them?
Yeah, I really did. So they were cold calls in the sense that I don't know any of these individuals. I sent them a note in advance, letting them know that I was working with the OCRF and that their name was given to me and that you were all going through a strategic planning process and you thought their input could be valuable. I would say everybody responded super quick, which tells you something about the level of importance they place on their relationship with the OCRF. The people that didn't, it was because they were on vacation and I got an out of office, or just they came back to me later and said, I'm really sorry, I'm just in the middle of something. But in general, everybody got back to me super fast, which is why I was able to get all the interviews done before today. And I think they were all really enthusiastic to have the conversation. So that was my general impression of how they felt, and we'll dive into some detail here.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mark.
Just the unsuccessful applicant, any different vibe from them versus the others?
No, not significantly. I think they felt, they expressed gratitude for the existence of the OCRF. I think they understood why they were unsuccessful. I don't think they felt negative about the fact that they were unsuccessful. So it was still a very positive discussion.
Great.
All right, next slide. So what I've done is I put some initial themes together. Once I finish the interviews from the other groups, you know, we might have different themes that emerge, and I'll probably put it together in something more formal. But I think because we're going to be diving into things today, I wanted you to at least get an idea of how this group was feeling. So this is a lot of what we just talked about to some degree. So I think there's general understanding that the purpose of the OCRF is to implement the Oregon Conservation Strategy. I don't think I had a single conversation where that wasn't able to be expressed by the individuals that I was speaking to, that that's a big focus for you all. I think, like I was mentioning earlier, overwhelmingly positive comments about the work that the committee does, high degree of appreciation that the fund exists, and the feeling that it fills a niche that isn't really able to be filled by other grants and other opportunities that they're aware of. So I think in general, they felt very appreciative that the OCRF is here and that the advisory committee has been doing a great job of doing the best they can, given the fact that you've all changed and morphed even since 2020. So you would think 3 years is not a long time, but as Javia pointed out in her presentation last month, you know, March of 2020, when y'all got started, is a little different than what you are today and how you operate. I think in general, there was great appreciation for the diversity of projects. I wondered if people would feel like that was a disadvantage. I think when it did come up as a disadvantage, it was a minimal disadvantage. And it was more framed in the sense of, it's harder to tell your story when you have such diverse projects that you're able to fund. How do you be really focused when you have that large, you know, that amount of diversity? But in general, most people seem like it was a really great thing that you're able to spread the love. That's kind of my words to summarize, that you're able to spread the love and fund big projects, small projects, projects across the state, lots of different project types like we saw in the 2 presentations earlier. So in general, that was sort of the sentiment expressed about what you all do and how well you're doing from their perspectives. Any questions on that? Okay, so if we go forward. There we go. So opportunities for improvement, that's always sort of something I like to hear from their perspective. Okay, you're doing great. It was a bit of a love fest at times, I have to admit, but where could things be better? Where do you see there's opportunities for improvement? Because the point of a strategic plan is to think about, well, how do we want to grow? How do we want to build on the good work we've been doing over the next for a year. So again, I think there was focus on the key habitats and species. I think this goes along with the idea that people recognize that you're heavily connected to the Oregon Conservation Strategy. And so anything to do with focusing on priority habitats, priority species, they felt was something that might even need more focus in the future, especially if funding becomes a challenge and or you're not having as large of grant amount cycles as you'd like, to make sure that you're really focused on those priorities. I kind of label this as conscious outreach. So really, how do we get to people that have not been engaged with the OCRF before? How do you extend OCRF's reach to new audiences? It was interesting, a lot of them talked about how it was that they came to know the OCRF existed, which was interesting, and they thought in some ways serendipitous at times. So what about the people that don't have the kinds of connections that maybe some of them have? That don't even know the OCRF exists. So how could you go out and reach new audiences? They mentioned, and this was just one example, somebody mentioned View of the Future as an organization, and I just put that, but there were other organizations as well that they suggested could become good partnering opportunities if you wanted to expand the reach. I will say there was a minor sentiment that came up that's a little bit contradictory to this, which suggests, wow, we're already competing against a lot of people for money, so it's scary to think about having more people know about the OCRF. We already can't fund all the projects we have, but they still thought in general it was in the best interest to be thinking about groups that have not been traditionally involved in conservation or recreation and just expanding the reach. So project outcomes. So as mentioned on the summary slide on the first page, everybody thought, yeah, we could probably be doing a better job of telling our stories. And all sort of expressed an interest. It might just be these particular groups that I talked to, like, let us help you do the job. I think they recognize that there's probably resource limitations to how much you as an advisory committee can go out and tell those stories, but they seemed very willing to be the voices and to help share their own stories. With a little minor caveat that maybe if you have certain expectations for us, you should make that clear as part of the grant process. So if, for example, the OCRF was to start to require some new reporting things from a grant applicant, grant recipient in this case, they'd like to know ahead of time what it is they're going to be asked to do to help market their own project successes. So if you want them to provide pictures or a narrative or any other kind of thing you might want to do post-project completion, they're happy to do it. They just kind of want to know ahead of time that that's what you're going to expect them to be doing, which makes sense. And then the last one was really about project funding, and a couple of them brought this up. And I think it might be because OCRF might have done some of this in the past, where sometimes private donors can donate money to particular projects. My memory from how you used to handle this in the past is a little bit fuzzy. But they said, hey, what if you have 5 great projects that you feel like really do meet the purpose of the OCRF, not just you didn't have money for them, like you truly, if you had the funds, they met all of your requirements. Can you publicize that in a way so that other people might pick up and fund them and or put a donation in place, etc. I think that also got connected to some conversations about matching that might have been available in the past, but isn't available now, or that was their perspective. So that was a little bit of an opportunity around, okay, we know there's limited funds, so how can we get creative about making sure that, like you said, all these great projects have a way of coming to fruition through some mechanism. So those were the summary of the opportunities for improvement. Anybody have questions or a follow-up question on those, even just comments?
Sherilyn, I do, and yeah. So this is wonderful. It really is. I've been thinking myself about this and our strategic planning and how we're going to move forward. And man, many of these points that you brought up just really helped me consolidate what I've been thinking. The idea of the project funding model piece, we'll talk about that maybe later on, ways that we might be able to work that out with entities like Oregon Wildlife Foundation. And oh man, and the outreach piece where they're volunteering to do some outreach for us. And if we can make that clear to them on the outset that would be part of it. An example, I guess, is Riva going to this trails meeting and getting one of our successful applicants to go and talk about it. I think there's a lot of, I mean, here we had this great feedback ourselves from just now 2 great projects, and that's great for us, but we need to be having everybody else hear these presentations in the context that this was being done by the OCRF and made possible by the OCRF. And maybe I think Sarah is still here, that and Riva thinking about how the department can help us reach out to the donors that we're getting through the licensing. We need to be telling them the story. And so yeah, this is great. Thank you very much. Mark Stern.
Yeah, I just had one question, I guess, and maybe it's for a different conversation about project funding model, but do we have a sense if OCF actually is interested or has donors that are going, well, gosh, if we only knew about some, wildlife recreation projects, we'd like to fund them, or are we hoping they'd be interested?
I've had discussions with Carlos, their environmental guy, and the Oregon Community Foundation, and I think they're open to it. And there was some we did collaborate. Actually, that was back in the Wild West days. We got funding for projects from Oregon Community Foundation for some of the projects we did on the coast. So we've already done that with them. So we certainly the door's been open. So yeah, that's definitely worth a conversation. Mauricio?
Thank you, Carl. I think it was, so I'm thinking about this third point on the last portion of it, on this idea of letting them tell their own story. And as we were seeing the presentations today, and it's so great, and you can tell that there is this appeal of camaraderie to those folks who are already sort of like in the biology spectrum of field of study. And I can sense the excitement of the folks on this side, like, oh yeah, like I can see why we're doing this. I feel that I really appreciate this idea of not having them tell a story that we want to hear here, but the story that speaks authentically about why it matters to them, the work that we're doing, and what our work was to make that happen. I know that we need to do a better job as sharing who we are, why we're here for more than one reason, of course. But I feel that hearing from them, that what the music that I'm hearing behind the lyrics here is maybe this shouldn't be about OCRF. Like, not make it about ourselves, us just as a vehicle that tries to fill in that gap that we know exists, but more about why this work is so important for them. Because once those stories are there, once we manage to figure out a way to share those stories, more folks like them, the ones that we are not seeing yet, are going to be able to see themselves as a grantee, as someone who can be funded through the OCRF. And we can finish the picture that we want to paint here in terms of conservation and recreation and extending it to new audiences. So I think that if and when, for instance, we start talking more about communications and how that's going to be applied, that might be a criteria that you want to bring back from this discovery period and make sure that we are very mindful and intentional about letting them know that it's not about what we want to hear, but it's about what they want to share and what makes this opportunity important to them and the work that they care about. That'd be it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mauricio. That's great. Thank you very much for that. Maybe you've been here a while, Srishti, but I have to say, I just noticed that Srishti has joined us. So welcome, Srishti. Great to have you. I'm not sure how much of this you've heard, but this is some really important stuff we're talking about now. And glad you're here.
Thank you, Carl. I was able to join at the tail end of the last presentation. So thankfully I made it to this discussion. And like I mentioned in the chat, I blame ODF&W because they double booked my calendar for the first hour. So that's on them.
You're just in demand, Srishti. I mean, we've got to expect that.
All
okay.
right.
Well, great.
Good. So next slide, there's, I think I have at least one more on this topic. So there we go. So not surprisingly, because they're all people that have applied for potentially received grants, they had a lot of input about the process and how you make decisions around the funding. So there's sort of a set of themes that you would expect from this group that would, is unique to them, that you're probably not going to hear so much from other groups. And of course, you have to take some of that with a grain of salt too, because they all have their own biases coming into the conversation and their decisions, whether to fund their projects or not. But like I said and mentioned earlier, super positive comments. So in general, I think there was some mixed feelings about the process, but for understanding for how it works. And I say that in terms of they recognize that state dollars are complicated and the way in which you have to administer the grants and the way in which you need to review the applications might be a little bit more cumbersome than compared to some other processes they might be used to. But they understood why that is the way it is, but they wanted to share that sometimes it can be hard. I think it really gave an opening to the equity and access bullet there, which is it does make it hard for some people. So individuals that don't have a long track record, individuals that don't have a lot of experience doing grants, individuals that barely have, money to keep, get their groups off the ground, have to find time to do the application process. So they just wanted people to be aware that it is easier for some than it is for others. Probably not a surprise to any of you. Support for large scale projects. Is it true that the grant is still $50K or you decide that every grant cycle? I couldn't remember.
Yeah, it has been. We decide every grant cycle, but it's 50,000 for a while.
Yeah, makes sense. So some people mentioned that some larger scale projects could be significantly larger in terms of dollars. And so they did not express that, oh, we want you to suck all your OCR, your precious funds into, one or two big projects, but just recognizing that some are very large and would require some significant funds if the funding was there. At the same time, they recognize the distribution in the distribution of funds that you do, right? Large scale, different kinds of projects. But they just wanted to point out for certain kinds of projects, 50K is a bit small for them. And then there were some comments about the recreation aspect, and I tuned in at the end of the rules part where you were making some adjustments in your purpose statement, which made me think about some of the conversations that came up here around recreation. So the idea that the funding criteria is probably more favorable to science-based projects with that conservation element to them, not straight recreation-focused initiatives. And I sensed maybe some lack of clarity around, is that to be expected? Should we expect that in the future? Maybe OCR funds are just not right for these kinds of recreation projects, not problems, projects. And or maybe we need to be rethinking the kinds of recreation projects that we put forward, because obviously recreation is important. It is a part of the purpose, and it's about getting people out there to appreciate and ponder and be more able to contribute to conservation when they're able to go out and enjoy the outdoor spaces, etc. So that was kind of one of the other themes that came up, is that that is probably a challenge for some people applying. So that was their feelings about the process and the funding decisions that you guys are all making. I think there were some comments too. They were more minor themes, not major themes, coming across everybody around the changing priorities. And I know this is happening each grant cycle based on, I think, different kinds of money with different kinds of direction with that money, I think has led to this funding cycle. We're looking for these kinds of things. Some of the applicants mentioned that that's hard for them because it's not predictable, right? They can't predict, oh, maybe I'm not ready to submit a grant right now. I'm going to wait till the next cycle. Maybe I'm too busy. Maybe we've just got competing priorities. And then they wait and they realize, oh, I kind of missed my window because what they're looking for in the next grant cycle doesn't really match with that project. Darn it. I should have applied last time. So that was probably a minor thing that came up. I'm trying to think of any other minor thing. No, I think that's a pretty good summary. So questions, follow-up, comments, thoughts about these themes?
Shirley, and I'll say it again, this is great stuff. You know, that whole idea about changing our priorities from time to time, some of that's out of our hands, but there may be ways we can be clearer. And this idea, the recreation piece, particularly, that really goes to Mark Labhart's comments about clarifying who we are. Mm-hmm. And making sure people understand that, like you said, maybe this is not the place for some of those folks to be applying to us. So it's really important, Mark's comment, and if we can clarify that even in our OARs, that may help with that. So Mark, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Because yeah, I think we can clarify that, you know, as it ties to the conservation strategy. And, you know, example of what I consider recreation is taking some inner city Portland kids out into a bat cave. And that's recreation. Take them out to a bat cave and let them explore bats for the first time and see what bats are like hanging on a cave. And those kids would just be blown away by that. But that, I consider that recreation. I don't consider it science-based project. It's taking kids out to learn about the outdoors. It's taking kids who maybe never been to the forest out to look at trees and do bird identification. And I consider that a recreation project, not a science-based project. It's not, you know, what most people consider like boating or something like that, or fishing or hunting. It's a different kind of recreation that that is related to the conservation strategy. So, you know, and we have funded some of those projects where I can't remember the name of that one group that we took out, and even the babies that we talked about. Those are kind of like recreation strategies. And we looked at an OCRF project on one of our commission tours in inner city Portland, where we went out, looked at the lakes, and one of these black, I forget what's called, black something, but they had toured out to this lake and looked at all the different kinds of things that a lake produced, from turtles to ducks to, you know, to all those kinds of things. And I consider that a recreation activity, not a science-based activity, but it teaches kids and learns about the outdoors and a love for the outdoors and wanting to be out there. So that's kind of where I lean toward when I say recreation focused initiative that ties to that conservation strategy. I don't know if that helps or hinders. That's kind of my thoughts on something.
Thank you, Mark. Mauricio?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what you were saying, Mark, and I think maybe that is kind of a little bit of a challenge, is that how we define that line between conservation and recreation. Some of those lines, the folks that are applying for these grants don't know that they could make that extension. Like when you were talking about the bats and the kids, I truly do believe that is a conservation effort. We are exposing these kids to the possibility of seeing themselves in a career, and they only can get there if they have those moments of exposure to that thing. Oh, if they don't fall in love with those bats at the moment, and we're not creating those spaces for it to happen, there is an effort in conservation that is missed for all of us. So I think maybe some education around what it means to be more innovative in the way that we look at conservation, because then we're going to find more bridges between that notion of recreation and conservation. I know, for instance, talking about that event that I was in this Saturday, there are so many of these folks that have never put on a set of binoculars and look at a bird on top of a tree. You would be surprised just how completely life-changing something as small as that could be. And we don't know that child that put on binoculars for the first time ever, maybe the one who comes up with a better conservation strategy 20 years from now. So I think that we need to look at this a little bit differently.
Yeah, one thing that came up in this conversation, I think it might tie to a conversation we will be having, because it's one of the themes in your mural storyboard as well, is around partnership, right? So how could maybe two organizations come together? So for the organization that doesn't have that conservation science background, how could they partner with somebody so that their activity might be taken to the next level and it really truly crosses the line, like you said, Mauricio, into something that does work for the OCRF? Liza Jane.
Liza Jane.
I'm pushing buttons. Thank you. So Mark and Mauricio, I enjoy this conversation and your thoughts. And I think about recreation though as creating opportunities for people to be outdoors. And so if somebody's going to offer fly fishing for elderly women, just grabbed a hold of that one, that, that's recreating to me, or, all kinds of hunting and fishing activities. And then the bats, and that's wildlife viewing. And I think we have both of those under our to-dos and missions. But I feel like we can expand into recreation, and it's a great conversation to have for all of us in defining what that means, so that we're clear, and then we can make great invitations to people to start thinking about how we can work together.
Good points. Maybe one more. Srishti.
I just wanted to just echo what my previous three colleagues have said here. It's just, I think it's a matter, when we look at recreation, it's a matter of who the subject of the recreation is. When we think about recreation for OCRF, the where, how does that recreation tie to anything that's related to the Oregon Conservation Strategy? And also just when too, because it's a matter of, I think, who we want to be a part of the recreation community here in Oregon, who hasn't had access to it, and how can we build that accessibility, and what kind of recreation projects would they like to have? So it's not so much as us prescribing that we will fund X kind of recreation or Y kind of recreation, but more like, what are the communities that we would like to support having more access to recreation? What are their needs in terms of that recreation? So I think it's a little more nuanced than just choosing whether we're talking about consumptive or non-consumptive versions of recreation.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think this aligns very well with what they were talking about, that it's a challenge to know, what's in, what's out. How do we recognize that recreation is sort of the doorway in some ways into other work? Right. I think, go ahead, Mark Stern.
Yeah, just briefly, I would second Sarah's comment in the chat that, we have another category of education and outreach. So, I think things like going to the Bat Cave with whoever could be in that bucket, as well as under recreation or not, but it's certainly within our purview.
Great. So just a little bit on what to expect, because that was sort of my summary for the themes from the coalition group and applicants. Fascinating conversations from super passionate people. I have to say all of the conversations went a little long because they had so much to say about their projects. Maybe they thought I would be making a decision one day. But I found their projects pretty fascinating, so I gave them space to talk about their projects, and I was pretty interested and had questions back. So, but they were great conversations, and I think the fact that they all responded pretty quickly, they all wanted to get on the call, they all had plenty to say, speaks a lot to how they feel about the OCRF. So the groups that we will do, well, I will do between now and the next meeting is our ODFW staff and our ODFW commissioners. Those are the two groups that are still left, along with a conversation with Representative Helm that I'm having tomorrow. So he just missed getting in before today's meeting. So what's great about that is that's a different perspective than the ones that we've had so far. So we'll be able to overlay that on top of what this group has shared with us. All right. So moving on to the next agenda topic, if you don't mind, Driva. Going back to building our foundation, following up on our current state analysis. You can go to the next slide. Before we jump into some detailed work that we're going to do for the rest of the meeting here, is just remind you of some of the key questions we said we want to answer through this process. The reason I thought it would be a good time to share it is look at some of the things that are coming up there, right? So communication, effective monitoring, scaling up, scaling down storytelling, communications, fundraising. I think we got a lot of good input already from our stakeholder interviews that will help in the process, but just wanted to have you all see this before we dive in again. And then if you go to the next slide. So what I did, thank you again for doing all your homework, is I took that mural board and I organized it into categories, which was pretty easy to do in most cases. And these are the categories that came up in general. Some of these could be merged, but I felt like I didn't want to merge them too early because then we might lose some of the nuanced differences between them. So a lot of comments are in there around funding, not a surprise. Storytelling, which I could have merged with public perception, but I think they're a little bit different, even though they're connected. A lot of comments about the need for legislative support. Focusing our investments, right? What are we going to fund? What are we not? What's really our purpose? I think goes to that last conversation we were having. Some comments about logistics application, and then the last two could have been merged as well, but I decided to leave them separate for now because they're slightly different. So one is just our OCRF resources, so things about our committee members, and then also things about partnership. So with that, I'm going to share. Do you have to stop sharing, Riva, for me to steal sharing? Let's see if this works. Did the mural come up?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm going to actually put this, because you guys might not have it handy anymore, in the chat. Just because we're going to be moving around there, and I don't want you to be relying on my eyes and my Zoom and my moving around. So if you feel like you need to go and look at something on your own, you'll be able to do that. But in the mural, you'll see now that I have all these categories. So in the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, all the different categories, I went through and tried to just marry things up so that we could then have some focused conversations. And so what I'm hoping that we'll do today is two things. One, I want you to just take a quick perusing of each of the areas. And if you have something in the mural that you think is unclear, you have a question about it, you would just like more clarification, if you could use one of these little question marks to put it by it. I'm sort of demonstrating because I had a question about that one, which is why it's in a miscellaneous category right now. But I wanted to just have an idea, make sure that everybody understood the essence of what was on the Post-its that are here right now. And if you had questions, we could add clarity later. So could you all just take five 5 minutes most to kind of, and we'll talk, and if you don't need that much time, we'll stop sooner. But just kind of look at what you have put up there yourselves, look at what your peers have added. If something is like, I'm not really sure what that is, just drag a little question mark icon down to it. If you remember, you can use the outline to move around. So you can get to the strengths, weaknesses, threats. If I was to go to threats, you could scroll your way down there. And I've put question marks sort of in various places. So anywhere that you are in the mural, you should be able to pop one of those question marks on. And then we'll probably kind of talk about them as we go. Is that pretty clear what we're doing? So we're all going to independently look, put a little flag if you think something's unclear to you.
No one can hear me. Can hear me. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I could hear you just now.
Oh, good. Okay. First
It's
time.
working.
Yay! I'm back in. Okay, so did you want us to do this for each of the sections or just for the green section first?
Yeah, each of the sections. Just take a
Got
quick look. If it's all like, yep, get it all, don't have any need for questions, you can move over to the next one.
Sherilyn, I have a question, and how do I make this bigger so I can read it?
Yeah, so it depends on if you are good at scrolling, but your fingers on the screen will sometimes scroll, but also down on the right, there's a little plus and minus zoom thing.
Okay, I got it. Got it.
And then you can use that hand that's to the left of there to kind of shift what part of the mural you're looking at.
Okay.
Took me a long time to get used to it. I've now coordinated my fingers to be able to do it. So to make use of the time, so opportunities for innovation in the strength, can you guys remind me what that was? I know we did it as a group at our August meeting. It was a strength, opportunities for innovation.
Yeah, I'm not following this very well, I'm afraid.
I'm going to leave it. If you want, Carl, you can come back to the Zoom meeting where I'm showing the sections and just let me know if you see something that you think is unclear and we can do it together.
Great.
So can you see that I'm in the strength section right now?
Yeah.
Cool. So if any of those are unclear to you, just let me know.
I think opportunities for innovation was just really talking about that, OCRF is still kind of broadly defined and there's some room for being entrepreneurial and to bring new ideas to the table, that we have a pretty broad mandate. So I think I'll just compare it to the private forest accord.
Yeah.
It says a very clear specific mission of we're mitigating for Forest Practices Act. OCRF is pretty open-ended.
I'm gonna move that down here then into this funding category. Sorry, Carl, I know you're following me and I'm moving. Any questions on all of this, or was it pretty clear for you?
I just had a quick question. It's probably a silly question, but
Yeah.
what is the RAWA? Like, I don't know why I don't know that acronym, or it's just not hitting me, but it's in several areas. RAWA.
Recovering America's
Wildlife Act.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes up down in opportunities.
Remember, Davia pointed out how our genesis was really tied to RAWA, actually, and I think we need to keep our eye on that as it evolves, because it looks, it does seem like it has an opportunity to pass.
One of the ones I really like that somebody else put up there, but it's just being connected with Oregon Field Guide. And, if we could develop that partnership there, where maybe on a quarterly basis, they were highlighting the projects of one of our applicants, our applicant could tell their story, but yet it would be a consistent avenue for getting our stories and our applicants' stories out in front of people.
Yeah. Where is that one?
I think it's up above where you are right now on the left side, just above partnership, media exposure like Oregon
Yeah.
Field Guide.
Great.
It's listed below down under resource partnerships too, right where your arrow was to the right.
Good. Yep. All right.
And I know somewhere in here I think under partnerships, there's a mention of Oregon Wildlife Foundation.
Yes, I think there is.
Partnerships, yeah, OWF partner. That's just a comment. Partnership is strong, but I think there's areas we should explore ways to really maximize that relationship. I think there's some really good opportunities there.
Great.
And that can answer, that may be able to help us address some of the issues we have, like where we can't take restricted donations anymore. And there may be ways to partner with Oregon Wildlife Foundation that's really beneficial to the OCRF, but to the coalition as well, in terms of tapping more funding and being more efficient. So I think that's an important piece to make sure everybody's aware of.
Sounds good. So I'm not seeing question marks. So can I take that as most of the things up here are pretty clear and don't need clarity? I know, Carl, you had trouble. Okay, good. I'm saying nodding heads. So with that, now that you've looked around at how do I categorize them, any trouble or difficulty with how I've categorized things, or do you think it's a reasonable way to start having the conversations? Okay, I see good thumbs up. I have to move back to see you all. So what I was going to suggest that we do today is dive into two of the areas where we had a lot of comments in all of the different categories, and start to brainstorm what would potential goals or actions be if this was to be a focus area for our strategic plan. And I would suggest that we do that first for the storytelling, because that was a big thing that came up. It also aligns with what our stakeholders shared with us. And then the second one that we might do would be around partnerships, because again, that came up as well. So I was hoping we would get to at least those two today and just sort of brainstorm priorities, goals, and actions that might be part of that focus area. Sound good? I'm coming back to see the visual thing. So I created over on the side a different view of the mural where we could just see individual topics all together. So instead of having them intermixed with everything over where I am on the mural board. So if you want to come back and look at my board, even though you have to rely on my own zooming, you'll see that there's now a section just called Storytelling Public Receptions. So I thought we would just talk about those, and then we could talk about, well, what might be some reasonable goals for us to have or actions to take. So we heard in terms of storytelling that, we're effective in our work. We have trust from our externals. We have a lot of diversity in projects, etc. But maybe we're not that effective. So if you kind of go over to weaknesses, right? Maybe we're not as effective. We're not as well known compared to other programs. It's hard to know how to get the attention of right people. So I think there's some definite weaknesses that were perceived. In the political factor section related to storytelling, there was an idea that advocacy is important. So it is important to get that storytelling out. I kind of merged some of the public perception things up here because I think if we're doing storytelling, it's important to recognize what some of the perceptions might be out there. So things about the rural and urban divide, and then also the fact that, conservation and recreation efforts are super important issues, but so are other things that people might be looking to fund. And then this was why I wanted to talk about storytelling first, because there were so many opportunities, right? So how do we use media exposure, using the informational hearing at Ledge Days, maybe using a public relations partnership to help us do some of the outreach, and or relying on other partnerships like OPB to go out and do some of our storytelling for us. And then this was kind of the threats, right? If we don't spend time on that in the next 4 years, if it wasn't a priority area, we might have a loss of trust, etc. And then what are some of the challenges for doing that? And again, some of these are repeated, but hard to get the right attention. How do we stand out? Conservation might take a backseat to other priorities. So I kind of just would like to have a general conversation. What's your reaction to all of that stuff related to storytelling, and how in your mind might it influence some potential goals or actions for the next 4 years? And I'm going to capture general notes, not in a very formal way, but just so that, you know, I'm hearing you and you can see what we're capturing. So storytelling, if we were to think about goals or actions we might take in the next 4 years, what are some of your thoughts?
I think one of them would be collecting stories on social media, probably, and promoting those more around groups.
And to add to that, I would use a variety of resources, a variety of communication techniques to tell the story. You know, for example, ODF&W does podcasts. So maybe we could do a podcast on OCRF. We mentioned Oregon Field Guide. So those are 2 sources. You know, maybe some other communication efforts. ODF&W does a thing called Messenger now, where it goes out to hundreds and hundreds of emails, and we can do that with potential and different methods to tell the story to reach different audiences.
Sarah Reif has her hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. And I think this is a process question for Cheryl, and I apologize to everyone. I'm on the road right now, so no camera, but you're all on mute, so I won't hear you groan when I ask this question. But Cheryl, when in the process, I imagine that we're going to generate a wealth of really wonderful ideas, but where in this process is there the overlay of what we can realistically accomplish in the time frame we've established for the strategic plan, given existing capacity?
Yeah, good question. So my hope is that we're going to brainstorm first for each of the categories. So storytelling, funding, you know, all of the different kinds of focus areas that we think are important, and we would prioritize after. So that would be more towards the latter part of the process. So like in December, we know we're going to have more than we can do, and we're going to have to make some choices. Thanks for asking that, because I should have shared that. That's why they say potential as opposed to the actions we will be taking. And Mauricio.
Thank you. So I think one question that I get on, one issue that I get on my professional career most often is like, we focus so much on like where we're going to put our message, how it's going to make it look better, and we don't think often enough about the why we want to tell this story. And I think maybe that's on the potential goals, on the area that I think that we may want to spend a little bit of thinking. So what are the benefits of telling our story, and what is the shape of this story? Are we trying to have a cohesive image for OCRF so that folks know why they would look for us, where to find us, and what's our purpose, and whether or not it aligns with our missions? That having that foundational understanding of what is it that we want to tell and for what reason may inform later whether the best way to do that would be through social media, through our connection with OPB. So another sub project of this will have to be, who's our audience? Who are we hoping to talk to? Once again, that is also going to inform what are the vehicles and channels that we may choose. But if we do the process backwards, we may end up with something really great looking that doesn't do much of all for our ultimate goals.
Yes, so Mauricio, not to put you on the spot, but you're right. That goes into the why would we do anything? Why would we do the actions on the right? And so I will put you on the spot. From your perspective, why would we? What would be a benefit of doing it?
I think a benefit would be for us to have little or no ambiguity as to what is our purpose and who would benefit most from connecting with us, and what kind of projects would be better suited to be in our roster rather than all the other existing funding opportunities that are already out there. So we're purposeful, we're intentional about how and who we provide funding for.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to put one on there so we start to get an idea of the difference between why we want to do something and what we might do to actually achieve it. Liza has her hand up. Liza Jane.
Thank you, because I was following up with Mauricio as well, thinking about the why and who, and I think about like a logo or a brand identification and in business, how that benefits either making more money. And so are we doing this to increase donations to us? And possibly are we doing this work to increase the number and understanding of for people who want to apply for grants to us? I think we can do both, but I'm really interested in how we encourage people to support us with their money. And I think we have to do this work before we can ask for that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sort of merging these around, so I'm a messy work here. I would describe everything at this meeting and the next meeting will feel really messy. I call it the messy part of the process, and it will be cleaned up later. Carl, you had your hand up.
I just reiterate, I think what Liza Jane said, as far as what is the goal of us telling a story, we have to be a bit Machiavellian about it, and a big goal is to raise funds. Like I think we need to focus telling our story to all the donors that have given through the license site. That's part of it. And part of that is to inform them what their money has done, but then it's also to to increase our funding and be able to tell the story to donors and increase our funding base. That's a fundamental piece. But at the same time, we want to be telling these stories to help sorry about my dogs, to satisfy our primary goal, and that is implementation of the Oregon Conservation Strategy. We talk about that enough and we get that out there, then more people that know about the Oregon Conservation Strategy, that's valuable in and of itself, whether we get money from them or not. So we need to popularize what we're doing, which helps support our partners in our coalition, and get the public informed that we're doing this, or what it is we're trying to do and what the Oregon Conservation Strategy is. So we have a very hardcore sort of raise some money perspective, but also a much more broader thing that's moving our goals forward. I think those are the two pieces that are that we're trying to tell these stories to achieve. So
yeah, I love that one you added, Carl. Other goals, or should we go back to actions? And we can move back and forth. So promoting the importance of the Oregon Conservation Strategy, making sure our purpose is clear, making sure our applicants understand the purpose so they know whether they're able to benefit from funds and or should go somewhere else, and raising funds. I didn't know if raise funds, increase donations is sort of the same thing, or if I should leave them as 2 line items for now, because they're slightly different depending on what action you take.
You could just put more money.
It almost is like the theme, yes. More money one way or another. Yeah, Mark's turn.
I'm not sure if you want this in here, but I think part of the storytelling is to strengthen the coalition that we have it be more engaged.
I totally agree. And Mark, I had that very same thought.
Great. So if we have this list of outstanding goals over here, let's go back to potential actions. I can't see hands when I'm over in the mirror. So if your hand's up and I'm not calling on you, just speak up.
But I'll start.
Yeah.
Potential actions. Sarah very appropriately brought up, what is our capacity? I mean, there's a gazillion things we can do. So we have to, kind of hone down on what we can do. Well, I think we've had some success working with the public relations folks for ODF&W. And we need to maybe formalize that somehow, or make it more functional, or more strategic, or more thoughtful in how we would engage them, and how they would move that forward, move our storytelling forward through the information part of the ODF&W.
Yep. Other comments on potential actions?
Mauricio?
Thank you. I have one very specific that I think might be a way to optimize our reach without overextending our efforts. Every grantee, anybody who has been funded through us, by us, in combination with us, they do their own storytelling in their own social media. They love telling about the projects that are moving forward. And I think it would be important for us to communicate with them that we would love to be tagged on their newsletter, to let them know. So like, for instance, when they're sending a newsletter telling about what's the status of their projects, we can send them, would you mind putting a hyperlink to the OCRF main page, OregonIsAlive.com. Same whenever they share something on social media, same whenever they're reaching out to independent donors, because that is how we organically can reach that network and narrow down the image that is, how we are perceived by those who see their own communication efforts. And I think that would be a super easy ask for them. Just hyperlink us, make sure that you tag us on social media. Now, please include our website whenever you send your email blast, that sort of thing. And I'm sure they would be happy to do it if we specifically ask for it.
We could build that into even the application, or even into the agreement when they sign the contract. Like, this is an expectation, is that we want you to tell your story, but include us in it. And that we can make that much clearer early on, so we're not just springing it on them. And that was brought up earlier, that they want to know ahead of time. So we can build to it. Remember that's Reva, so we can somehow build that into the application. Liza.
Thank you. I was thinking kind of the same with the people who receive grants. I know on our OWEB project, the first one, Restoring the River, we've still have a giant billboard as you enter the gate that lists all the partners that made that possible with their logos. And we talk about it a lot when we're doing tours. And it's a win-win opportunity for the funders and for the recipients. And then I've been just dying to tell you guys about this, and maybe you already know, or I just haven't seen it live, but I saw it on the internet, and it was a way to get funds, and it's like one of those digital, like a big sign, billboard kind of deal. and you walk by it and you can see that, you know, people, the example I think was people that were hungry, and you take your, you know, your Apple Card, like you just go swoosh, like at your phone, like everybody does. And then the picture changes and people are eating bread. So you get this sense that you actually made a difference with your phone at $20 as you're walking down the sidewalk. And I thought of all the awesome photography we could have on wildlife and birds and people outside, and like you do your deal and somebody just drinking their $20 Starbucks goes, oh, and swishes their phone and ding ding, and it goes. And I have anybody seen that in an urban setting along the sidewalk? I know, I think we should crack this open. I think it would be really, really cool. So that's a funding source. But as far as with the grants, I think that's a win-win, and we should ask for, support that as well.
Riva, you have your hand up. I'm guessing you might want to allow the public comment, maybe.
No, actually, I was just
Oh,
gonna,
good.
I was going to just add to the discussion about how to put that in the agreement. And I just wanted to let folks know what we have currently in the agreements under grantee responsibilities. So it's actually a little bit stronger than a request. It is a grantee responsibility to recognize the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund and the Department of Fish and Wildlife in communication materials associated with the project. So that's what we have there currently. And then listening to your comments about from Mauricio and everyone else about what other ways we could have them engage. Maybe we could think about what else we could add in there that would kind of expand that. That's already there.
Yeah, I think that's good. And it'd be good, Riva, when we do our progress we've made to date, like how much are the recipients following through with that? Because, you know, you sign your agreement and you read through it all, and then what happens? You forget, right? Oh, I'm supposed to do that. I didn't really realize I'm supposed to do that, even though it was in the contract, right? I'm just speaking of somebody that enters into a lot of contracts. Seriously.
I was going to say yes and to that, because I think part of the requirement also feels a little formal and like grant processy, where you ask like, we want to be recognized in any communications you do, and most organizations will do that, but almost like a formal part of the process. Whereas storytelling is more, I don't know, personal and nuanced than that, where we want them to be able to tell that they're part of OCRF or supported by OCRF, but in a more excited way than, and we were funded by OCRF. I don't know how to say that, but I hope you get what I'm trying to communicate here.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, when I've made spots, it feels different when you say like, this was paid for by, versus we were glad, we were so excited to be part of this coalition. It's just like some basic humanity that I think we need to infuse in some of these things. And perhaps that's why I certainly have not seen it being featured in, I don't spend much time on social media, but I'm sure somebody's tracking whether or not people are tagging us on things. So maybe that might be the action, actually following up on whether or not there is a handle that we can check to see if we've been tagged on.
You can ask them to say, be prepared to tell the story, and in a way that it moves the Oregon conservation strategy down the road. And that's something like that's our expectation, is be able to tell a story, not just say this was funded by the OCRF. Mark Stern has his hand up.
Yeah, maybe going down a slightly different rabbit hole, but just going back to, having the governor declare Nature Day of Oregon again is a great opportunity to tell the story. And, I think that event we had at Revolution Hall was, one way of getting the word out and telling those stories.
Can you say that one more time, Mark? The beginning part was an example.
Yeah, 2 years ago, Governor Brown declared Nature Day of Oregon, which kind of highlighted OCRF when we had that public event.
Wasn't it
celebration?
wasn't that the actual title, The Nature of Oregon, and didn't Mauricio come up with that?
I defer to Mauricio, absolutely.
There was intentionality behind it, and yes, I think it was once again to try to make it both for wildlife and people.
Right.
The nature that exists in Oregon, but also the nature of the Oregon folk.
But again, I think getting that profile out of the governor's office and making that kind of declaration goes a long way.
You know, I liked that so much then, and hearing it again now, I like it so much now. We can frame, I think we should consider framing all of this potential action under the title of The Nature of Oregon, because that helps tell the stories that we're trying to tell. That encapsulates it right there. So I like The Nature of Oregon is just a great, not Nature of Oregon, The Nature of Oregon. It's a very specific thing where it kind of has a multiple meanings. You know, when you say The Nature of Oregon, you're talking about all of it, the people, the wildlife, the habitat, and that's a nice rallying way to put it all together. That's what we're trying to show is the nature of Oregon.
Right. Well, I think that was a really great start at potential goals and actions for that focus area. I'm watching the clock because somebody at some point will want to do public comment and probably officially end the meeting. I was hoping we would do 2 of these focus items at the meeting, but we talked about the outreach a little longer than I planned, but I'm not worried about that. So this gives you an idea though now of what we're going to start to do for each of those focus areas. So funding, like looking at all our strengths, all our weaknesses, opportunities, what can be some goals and actions. Partnerships, looking at our strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities, what could be some potential goals and actions? And again, Sarah brought up a good point. We'll probably have a longer list than we'll want to commit to in the strategic plan, but for now, let's list them all for the focus areas and prioritize later.
That's perfect, Cheryl Lynn. We won't, in subsequent meetings, I think we're done with the OAR thing, which takes a big chunk of time. So I think we'll be better able to. This is really important. I really think I'm getting more kind of excited about this whole thing. I think this was the right time for us to do this, and I think Cheryl Lynn, I forgot how good you are at this, and we're gonna really come up with a nice product. I think it's really worth us thinking about it and putting the effort into it. But again, I think if you think we'll be able to fit all that in, we're right at the end of this, and we do have to ask for public comment, and we're a little bit late on that, so we should do it now, and then we can wrap up the meeting. So is there, Revi, have you gotten any indication that anybody wants to make a public comment?
I haven't heard anything, but if there are members of the public that would like to make a public comment, now would be the time, and you can just state your name and organization. See if anybody.
Yeah. I will say I see Tim Grathis in the audience, and I really appreciate that he's here. And we were going to talk about partnerships, but it sounds like it's going to be at the next meeting, I think. And likewise, Oregon Hunters Association, Mike Toady, he's always here for us, and really appreciate you being here. But we're going to talk about partnerships next time, and I think we should be prepared to engage some of the folks in that discussion that have been participating with us. And I think especially we have some opportunities with the Oregon Wildlife Foundation, and I'm putting that out there in part so you guys think about that. Think about ways that we can expand that relationship in all the creative and innovative ways that we've done in the past, and really come up with a really nice relationship. And just as almost homework for y'all, I came across, I had I'll just digress a little bit. I had a really interesting meeting. I got to go to Trout Creek Mountains for the weekend with Brent Fenty. It was a fantastic experience. But Erin Borla, who is head of the Roundhouse Foundation, was there, and we had a great conversation about the OCRF. And she just knows everybody, knows how the system works. She just has these incredible ideas that just I had not even considered. She told me about a relationship in Wyoming where there's a 501c3 that works with the department. It's called Wildlife, spelled W-Y-L-D. It's the Wildlife Fund. And I'd ask you all to take a look at that. Go look at what they're doing in Wyoming, this organization. And not that we would emulate that exactly, but it's like, oh my God, people are thinking of these great ways to partner and do things differently to help the department. And so before we have that conversation next time, I want y'all to think about that. And as you all know, the Oregon Wildlife Foundation has been a key supporter. We've done some fantastic stuff together, and I think we can really look to enlarging that. Tim, did you, since I called you out on that, did you have anything to add on that?
Just that there's definitely some really positive models out there of a 501c3 nonprofit working collaboratively with a Fish and Wildlife or a fishing game organization in other states. Idaho is an example. California's got some examples. So you can look around the country and that definitely exists. And frankly, that's why Oregon Wildlife Foundation 42 years ago was created in part, was to be a vehicle through which private contributions could be made to support work that's of a public benefit. So Fish and Wildlife are of a public benefit. And so that's why we exist. That's why we're here and been around trying to work with the department for a long time, and would relish the opportunity to look at new ways, explore different models to make that even more effective and capitalize on what both organizations can bring to the table. So thanks for that opportunity. I look forward to that conversation.
Thank you, Tim. I just wanted to bring this up for everyone to think about in the interim. Mark Labhart had your hand up.
Well, just real quick, a non-agenda item before we leave, Carl. I have been in conversation with Brandy Hemsley from the governor's office. She's the executive appointments advisor. And I'll just read you a quick email she sent me. She says, I'm sorry to miss you, but we definitely can connect at another time. I appreciate you letting me know about your position you're recruiting for. I can definitely help with that. Maybe we can set up a virtual chat so I can learn more and provide some focused support. I'd be open to that and can ask the team assistant to set something up. In the meantime, I'll add this to my list of positions to keep in mind and then traveling around and talking to folks. So I reached out to both Reva and Sarah, and I don't know if they have any, has that a meeting happened yet, Reva, to try to get this last position filled on OCRF done yet?
We have not filled the position, but I'm happy to set up that meeting.
Okay.
Brandy. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to keep pushing on that,
Thank you,
Carl.
Mark.
We need to get that last position filled, and if we can't fill it from that geographic area, we've done with the potential OAR drafting that we can pick somebody, but we need to complete the full complement of the OCRF advisory committee. So
agreed. Can you, Reva, also look to see? I think there's a bit of confusion with the change from before. Just do we have any applicants for that? We have some applicants, but exactly do any of them come from that area? And I know Mark has had some suggestions, and Kelly has suggested someone I'm in the process of communicating with. So if any of you all have some ideas for that basin and range ecoregion, then let's work on that.
So a quick summary of the recruitment for the Northern Basin and Range is that a lot of you all committee members have recruited out. Mark and Kelly and Carl, and both Marks, I believe, have been reaching out to folks, and Phil Milburn at the district office, ODFW, he's reached out as well, and we haven't had any of our recruiting efforts result in an application, unfortunately. We have had some applications come in, but they were people in Salem, not in the region. So, and not from ones that we have reached out to as eligible applicants. So that's kind of where we're at. Yeah, and if anybody knows of anybody or can reach out to their networks, that would be much appreciated to get that position filled. And I'll set up a meeting with Brandy, Mark, and see what help she can provide us.
Yeah, and we don't, if I understand now, Sarah's not on, but if I understand the way the OAR is crafted, if it's over a year and we haven't been able to fill one from that region, we can go outside of that region and look for candidates. Is that correct? So
that's what we're adding into the rule
okay.
revision. Yes.
So, so keep in mind, folks, we really need to get that position filled. So any help would be much appreciated if you have outreach out there. So.
Yeah, Mark just asked, there's a guy I'm in communication with who was the superintendent of the John Day fossil beds. He was retired and has expressed an interest, but he just had some surgery, and so it's kind of delayed that discussion. But I'll get with him and then with Kelly. So we got some people out there. I think they're not going to be able to help us find someone, the governor's office. They're going to help facilitate getting it done. So we need to find those people ourselves and get the applications. So, all right. So I think, is there anything else that folks have? This was a great meeting, Sherilyn. Thank you so much. I thought that went really well. And let's look forward to the next one when we can really dig into this stuff. And we've gone a little bit over, but not too bad. Mark has his hand up.
Yeah, I just wondered, Sherilyn, were you going to give us a homework assignment or to be determined?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to give you a homework assignment because I know we're going to have a much longer portion of the meeting for strategic planning next time. So I don't feel like we're behind. So there probably will not be a homework assignment other than in your mind informally know that we're going to start breaking down each category and talking about goals and actions. So if you go back to the mural board and you see all those different categories, be starting to think about what we did today for storytelling, because that's what we'll start doing for all the other categories. But you don't need to write it down or bring it to me with a, in a fancy report cover. Just have your thoughts ready at the next meeting.
Okay.
All right, so that's your orders. All right, everyone. Thank you all so much again for a great meeting, and we will see you next time.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Meeting adjourned.